While originally just small, stripped-down versions of its 16-bit success stories, 8-bit Sonic eventually came onto a life of its own. Let's have a look at that. I'm going to take a different approach with this one. These two relatively small games were released 3 years apart on the same formats, Sega's Game Gear and Master System machines. Together, we'll look at the way the Sonic franchise evolved on Sega's aging 8-bit architecture. Evolution may be too generous a word though. In here I'll be looking at Sonic Chaos, also known as Sonic and Tails in Japan, and Sonic Blast, which is known as G-Sonic in Japan. One of the later games released on the Sega Game Gear period. Both developed by Aspect for Sega. I feel that these two games represent opposing poles of the 8-bit Sonic experience. Sonic Chaos, while not the greatest of the 8-bit Sonic titles, was very good, while Sonic Blast, well, it simply wasn't. Most people played Sonic the Hedgehog on their Mega Drive, Genesis, Secam, or if you were so inclined, the Scorpion. How about the other console that Sega had? You see, back in the early 90s when Sonic was just rising up to become the powerhouse he was, it was common for a company to keep their 8-bit systems working for a few years as a budget console. The Sega Master System kept breathing well into the 90s in Japan and Europe, and the Mega Drive was even backwards compatible, so there was really no reason not to try out these light launches. Not only that, if you carried enough batteries, at least 20, you could play them on the Game Gear too. So I'll check out the earliest entry first. Sonic Chaos allows you to play as both Sonic and Tails for the first time in 8-bit. You could play as Sonic on the format previously, but Tails has always been an objective, only appearing in zone splash screens and the endings. Both characters play slightly differently due to their abilities, with Sonic retaining a variant of his Super Peel Out from Sonic CD that is named the Strike Dash here. It's similar to the Spin Dash, except it allows you to travel faster than when in a ball, but leaves you comparatively unprotected. Sonic can also don a pair of rocket shoes to zip through the stages faster. Tails runs slightly slower than Sonic, and cannot use the rocket shoes, but gains the ability to fly in 8 bits, with the deft combination of the up and jump buttons, which can make the game easier. It's slightly odd switching from pump controlled flight to switch based flight. Tails will stay hovering if you let go of the controls. Weird. Sonic Blast, on the other hand, offers the ability to play as Sonic and Knuckles in a nod to its more successful 16-bit counterpart. Sonic gains a double jump ability that allows him to reach higher areas, similar to the Lightning Shield bonus power-up in Sonic 3 and Knuckles. Knuckles can glide and climb walls just like he can in the previously mentioned game. It was released as the partner game to Sonic 3D Flicky's Island, which, while not the best Sonic or Flicky-based game, was better than this. Graphically they're opposites too. Sonic Chaos revels in its 8-bit graphics. It doesn't particularly push the system, but it's nice enough. The Master System tended to have nicer graphics than the NES anyway, and this wasn't an exception. Sonic Blast's graphics are an attempt to be like Rare's Donkey Kong Country, and it uses pre-rendered graphics with pseudo 3-dimensional shading. The difference between this and Donkey Kong though is that the Game Gear is a much less powerful format than the Super Nintendo, and has a larger area of play. In this, Sonic and Knuckles take up a huge portion of the screen. For all its technical prowess, it ends up looking like shit for it. Speed is an important factor to the Sonic franchise. It's the main reason why anyone would choose to play it over the likes of Mario or Kirby. So how do these rack up side by side? Well, Sonic Chaos does a decent job at transferring the speed of its Mega Drive relatives. It's slower, yeah, it has smaller levels as well. It's a weaker console, so we can expect some cutting. It was never going to be as impressive as its Mega Drive brethren. Blast, however, well, let me just say, there is no speed in Sonic Blast. Let's just get that out of the way right now. This game is working far too hard to maintain the graphics for there to be any quantifiable speed. Just look at Sonic Go. He might finish a level by next week. Jesus, fuck, this is no Sonic game. There you go, I improved it. That's the best light you can ever see this game in. Paused. So yeah, they both follow a familiar Sonic pattern. You collect rings to not die, try to beat the levels as quickly as possible. Enemies are traditional robots. Along the way you face bosses, which in Sonic Chaos are robots constructed by Dr. Eggman, and in Blast, well, I'm still walking to see if there are any bosses. Both games feature special stages and they take a different approach. Completing this will enable you to obtain a Chaos Emerald and the true ending in traditional Sonic style. Failing means you have to tackle the whole last act again. Very, very unusual. Tails, however, cannot obtain any emeralds at all. Pricks. In Sonic Blast, special stages are hidden in giant rings a la Sonic and Knuckles in Sonic 3. You're only awarded with an emerald if you complete the stage on the second act. Completing one in the first act simply gives you an extra life. A bit of a cop-out, actually. You need to collect enough rings like in Sonic 2, but the stage looks more like it's from Sonic 3, only slower. Secondly, there are only 5 emeralds to be obtained in this game. In conclusion then, if you want a handheld Sonic or just want to play the 8-bit Sonic games, then it's best to stick to Sonic Chaos and its sequel, Truffle Trouble, rather than Sonic Blast. Don't be tempted by a static screenshot, because what is waiting for you is a horrendous waste of time, and a bloody ugly one at that. Obviously, if you really want to play Sonic, then stick to the 16-bit games, as these are nowhere near as fun, but the best games on the format were a decent substitute if you, for some reason, didn't have a Mega Drive, or needed some new Sonic games to hold you over for the next release, or if you wanted to burn up batteries on the bus.